Why, hello everybody. My name is Prunk, and today we are going to talk about items. And basically, I'm going to show off my blue-purple deck, specifically focused on getting out Tamatoa so shiny. So this is the item deck you have been looking for. If you've seen this card and you like that song and you can't get it out of your head and just sings shiny, and you want to find all the shiny items to put into the shiny deck, this is the best thing I got for you. After countless failed builds to make a item deck in Tamatoa good, this is a very playable, relatively affordable version of the deck. There's only going to be a playset of big cards in here, but let's go over the card by card, and I'm going to go over a little bit of a strategy to this and why I chose these two colors to play it out, and we'll go from there. All right, so we are playing Purple Package. It is a pretty small package overall. I think we only have, what is it, 23 colors in here? So, and pretty much all of them are draw and recursion cards, with the exception of like Befuddle. The reason being is purple is really good to get to your draw, and you are going to want to get into your items quickly. And when you play an item card, it basically does nothing for like the turn, period. They don't do much in general until the next turn, use in most cases. So having those item cards out is you're going to lose to aggro in most other cases. This current deck build is about 8-3 on Pixelborn as a time of making this video, and this is probably the best item deck I could have came up with currently. There's definitely room for improvement, and we're going to go over it. But starting with the purple cards, we're going to play 4 Magic Broom. The reason we're playing the Mickey package overall, we're going to play 4 Magic Broom, 2 Mickeys. We're playing this just purely to get recursion, because there's going to be a lot of times that you'll probably just ink things that you might not need, and some of your items might get destroyed because of Beast, who's in every steel deck right now. And there's just going to be times where you're going to need that recursion, and honestly, it's the only real early game card that we're probably going to play. Get your Befuddleds back is pretty helpful as well. So there's just a lot of room for Broom, and it's a good early game card that helps you keep your hand full, especially when you're playing it off with Mickey Mouse. So Broom is still great. This is probably we're just playing a small package of it. We're not playing. We're just doing 4 and 2 because it is not really what the deck's focused on. But having that recursion is really helpful in here. Other than that, we're playing 4 Maleficent to draw. Just it's a draw card, and she's a 2/2 stat line, and she's 3, and she's going to sing pretty much all your other songs. So yeah, she's pretty good and keeps the deck consistent. Befuddle, we're going to be playing 4 copies of this. This card right here, I used to just not really like, but I'm starting to appreciate it more and more as aggro becomes more and more popular. It's going to get rid of Symbols, so that way you can tech into Lilos. It's going to get rid of Lilos, so that way you don't die in lore if you can't deal with it, which a lot of time in the early game, this deck is going to struggle to deal with certain cards. So Befuddled out a Lilo, if you can Befuddle a Lilo on turn 2, it's pretty good if you can't deal with it, because a lot of your cards don't really start coming out until 2 and 3. So Befuddle is still pretty great. It's pretty much a requirement. Pot of Greed, aka Friends on the other side. Draw 2 cards. We're gonna play 2 copies of Magic Mirror. People were yelling at me about not playing 4 for some reason. You don't really need to see this card at 4. It's another item. You're gonna be playing a lot of items in general, so you're gonna have plenty of draw power. And seeing this in your opening hand sounds good on paper, but it's usually not, because it's gonna cost you 4, and you play this on turn 2, and then you play something hopefully on turn 3, and then you draw for turn 4. Like it's not that great. This is a better late game card than early game card in this deck, at least. We're playing 1 Ursula's Cauldron. I kind of wanted to bump it up to 2, but 1 has been working fine, and you just want to make sure you don't misplay it with the Magic Brooms. I have done it several times where I've Magic Broomed, or I've Ursula Cauldron and then Magic Brooms, and then it just wastes the Cauldron, so I don't know what's coming up next. So just be careful about that. And Rabbit's Pocket Watch, we are going to be playing 2 copies of. This is a very strong rare item card. It's going to give all your guys rush. It's going to be really powerful when you can synergize it with Magic Brooms with Mickey Mouse. It's just a very strong item. It's ink at the worst case. The first one you probably see is probably going to be ink, but afterwards in the late game, this card comes into clutch. So that is my pretty small Amethyst package. A lot of them are just 4 drops and a couple items, but it seems to be working pretty well. When we get over into the Sapphire card list, it's going to be a lot of ramp. the main card we're going to be playing, Gramma, Tala. We're going to want to see this card in our opening hand to help us ramp up fast. From there, we're playing 3 Bells. Realistically, she is not that good. You could possibly replace her with Ariel, which is pretty strong. Um, I actually cut her altogether though. She does have strong combos, especially with was it Eye of the Fates. This card lets you chosen character gains 1+ more lore per turn, so you can basically have Ariel on board, have her quest, then play Eye of Fates, activate Eye of Fates, then she quests for 2 more, and then play another item, and then have her quest for 2 more. So you can basically quest her for like 5 or more, possibly more in one turn. So it can be extremely strong. But in my testing, it just wasn't consistent. I I could be playing it wrong, to be honest with you. I can see the potential in there. It's definitely there, but I wanted to make this as consistent as I can, and Ariel just wasn't really my win condition. But that doesn't mean she doesn't have a place in this deck. I do encourage, please try her and see how good she can be. I think she is strong. I just didn't put her here, and I might be wrong. But so far, my deck is 8-3, and so I'm pretty happy with it without her being included. From here, so Belle is probably the weakest card in this deck. This is what you could possibly replace the Ariel. I'm keeping her purely because I want her as Ink. But if you are playing Fishbone Quill, you can probably play the Ariel instead. I think that is the only switch that I'm really considering with this deck. Otherwise, what Belle does, just -1 cost for an item card that I play. That's pretty decent. After requesting, and she quests for 2, and she's got a good stat line, and so that's why I'm keeping her in. Mickey Mouse. This card is phenomenal. This card is either going to be Ink because of your Fishbone Quill, or he's going to give you an Ink, and then just be a good stat line. He is also probably going to be singing a lot of songs because we're playing the friends on the other side, so he's probably my main card that I'm using it for. So just be aware about that. One jump ahead, he's really good, and just giving you more Ink, and he's a card that you really would want to sing a lot of cards with, but he's not necessary. He's probably one of the better cards. If you see him in your opening hand, you're going to want to keep him. Maurice. Maurice is basically the boss monster of this deck, in a way. So this guy, whenever this guy quests, you pay 2 less for the next item card you play. Whenever you play an item, you may draw a card. You play a lot of items in this deck. I think we're at 14. So we're going to be drawing a lot of cards with him out. He is just going to be there to help us get to our answers. The reason you don't want to play this card just on turn 6 if you have no items. You're going to save this card until you know you can help. That is the biggest mistake I've seen a lot of people play with the item build, and they'll just drop Maurice because you want to make sure you have an item in your hand so that way you get at least 1 draw before you really play him. Unless you have a way to protect him, he's most likely going to be the target of a Dragon's Fire if you're playing red or just something else. But you make sure you can protect this card before you play him. That is the biggest thing I will stress. From there, the money card of this deck is Hades. Hades is a staple in blue. You are going to want to play this in any blue deck that you have. He's $30 a pop, so $120 to play Hades. It is not a requirement, but at the same time, it's kind of a requirement because this deck desperately needs to have removal. There is a red variant that I was testing. It's that way I can play like Dragonfires because this deck just struggled in removal so bad. I tried it with Steel as well. Steel kind of works, but not as good in my opinion. Hades is the answer just to a lot of removal cards, and it comes into play, and it's literally won me the game several times, being able to out specific cards and then dropping this big body 3/6 guy. Hades is great, $30 each. He is a staple. I don't see that price being that different until we get a lot of reprints. So we'll see how it goes afterwards, but you're going to probably want him if you're going to try and play this deck competitively. If you're not, but other than that, Tamatoa. So this guy, the reason I wanted to make this deck so shiny is because when you play this character and whenever he quests, you may return an item card from your discard to your hand. This character gains +1 for each item you have in play. I have dropped him and made him gain like 8 lore and stolen 3 games of my victories because of this card. It is often I will drop him on turn X, and the very next turn, I just play 2-3 item cards in my hand and just surprise them, and I get the victory that way. Tamatoa is a great card. He is a threat. If somebody is playing an item deck and you see this card, you're going to want to deal with it because, surprise, they may have 3-4 cards in their item cards in their hand that they've just been storing or not playing just yet because they were either saving it for Maurice or as a surprise, hey, here's Tamatoa thing, like I've done. I have stolen games with this card. It is hilarious. It is a troll. I love this card. I love the theme of the deck. Try it out. Other than that, we're just doing some more ramp. One jump ahead, I actually didn't put in. So I have at 64 cards right now. I didn't put this card in the deck at first, but I think it was a. I think it's required. I kind of needed. And again, you're probably going to be singing with Mickey quite a bit with the card, and it's just more ramping to kind of get to our quicker cards. It is probably the first. I was testing it without it, and I was doing fine. I just think that you could probably play a 64 card deck of this because a lot of things are just going straight to your inkwell. So if you're playing Steel, you might run out of cards quicker than you might think, especially if they're playing a whole new worlds with this and you're milling your own cards. So playing a couple extra cards might just save you a game. But one jump ahead, I don't think it's necessary, but I'm playing it now, and it's been testing fine. Let It Go. It's basically just cheaper Hades. It's inkable as well, but realistically, you should probably save this in your hand for the removal of cards you need. The biggest stress that I need to say about these two cards, Hades and Let It Go, because it is your key source of removal in this deck. In fact, it's basically your only source of removal besides Befuddle, and that's just for lower target creatures. You're gonna want to save them until people drop their bosses. You're gonna play it. You're gonna play these cards on the Aladdins, the Ursulas, the Elsas, the great Tinkerbells. Like you're going to play those on your opponent's boss monsters, and that is it. Do not waste these cards. Keep them in your hand. Just because it's turn 7 and somebody has a Tibbs out, that doesn't mean that you play Hades just to put pressure on the board and you have nothing else to play. You keep it out on the field. Unless that Tibbs is about to win the player a game, keep it in your hand. So Hades and Let It Go is your source of removal for this deck. Do not waste them. That is the biggest advice I can give for players trying to play this. Other than that, we're playing Coconuts. We are playing a lot of heavy defense creatures. So Coconuts is actually pretty decent, and it's a good item. It's inkable if you don't need it. You probably, again, ink the first one and then play the second one later on. A lot of your items you're going to ink at first, with probably the exception of Fishbone Quill. But even then, in the early game, I probably still ink it, just because I don't want to burn through my hand that much unless I'm really trying to ramp out Maurice and have other sources. But at that point, you are drawing a lot, but you don't want to waste your hand. Your hand is your best resource that you have. From there, Coconut Basket, we got 4 copies of Fishbone Quill and 4 copies of Eye of the Fates. Eye of the Fates is a very good card, and this is +1 on Tamatoa, +1 again because of its own effect. So if you're playing 4 copies, this is how I'm stealing games and taking 10 for and just trading for 10, dropping 2-3 of these, activating them. Hey, they count as 3 items. It's been a powerhouse secret hitter. Love this card. It's 4 copies. So as you look at it now, this entire deck would cost you about $227, and about 120 of that comes down to Hades. Everything else in this deck is pretty cheap according to card game standards. A lot of them are rares, $5 quills, $5 Let It Go, or $7 Let It Goes. Tamatoa, who's your boss, $3. Maurice, who's another boss, $2. Everything else in this you can basically get in starter decks pretty cheap. Yeah, like this is a really cheap deck to build outside of the Hades. If you don't have the Hades, consider maybe swapping from purple to red, just to get that destruction aspect out of it. But because there are still some really good items in red deck, but blue has so far been my best. Or steel is another good option, but steel can get just as expensive, and you're gonna need it just hasn't worked out as well as purple, in my opinion. And having that small purple package is just really good. Some other cards you can consider adding in for purple is Ursula, just having another big statted boss monster to kind of replace maybe replace a Tamatoa for Ursula if you're playing that. She's draw power, reduces lore, and just a big stat line too to tag with coconuts. Ursula is phenomenal to kind of play with it. Other than that, there's not many changes I would probably do. I've tried doing with princesses, and it worked out okay, but I don't think it's as necessary, especially Belle is basically another copy of Tamatoa in a way. just you have to have 10 lore or ink into the field to really get her out. But she's also often immediately taken out compared to Tamatoa as well. Tamatoa just has that big shock value of being able to surprise your opponents with, hey, this guy was on the field with only 1 lore. I'm going to drop these 3 item cards and now gain 5 or whatever lore instead. So it can be a lot better than just playing with the princesses. Also, if you're playing the princess engine, then you're probably swapping out with like Aura, Defending Guardian, Give Things Ward. It's just not as good in my opinion, so you don't really need the Belle. The only real card I think that to improve this is Ursula. I don't play. Where's the card? If it's not Baroque or whatever, it's just return an item card from your hand. That's kind of what you have. What's it called? That's why you have the magic brooms, and it's just they're actively better. So this is my deck list for an item build. If you want to try it out, then I'll put the link in the description below. And I think that's going to do it, guys. Thank you so much for it. If you do have any good feedback on this, or if you want to try it out, or just tell me success stories, tell me your failure stories, what can we improve? Let's build this deck together, and good luck.